Lecture 10, Medieval World. After pagan Rome fell, the Roman Western world was civilized and evangelized by the Catholic Church. In doing so, Western civilization became grounded in a culture formed in the heart of the Church, argues Thomas E. Woods in How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. The medieval time in which this occurred was far from being a supposedly dark time, but rather one full of light and creativity. During the medieval age, writes Wood, and I quote, "The university system, a gift of Western civilization to the world, was developed by the Catholic Church. Historians have marveled to the extent to which intellectual debate in those universities was free and unfettered. The exaltation of human reason and its capabilities, a commitment to rigorous and rational debate, a promotion of intellectual inquiry and scholarly exchange, all sponsored by the Church, provided the framework for the scientific revolution." End of quote. Through the perspective of the medieval era of being one of light, creativity, and promotion of human reason, we will look at medieval education, science, guilds, literature, and art. This is not to say that the medieval era did not have its share of darkness that all ages contain. But instead of highlighting these aspects, which of course includes the horrific Black Plague, also known as the bubonic plague, that claimed millions of lives in Europe in the mid-14th century, we will focus on the more inspiring aspects of medieval life. A way for defining the beginning and end of the medieval way of life can be 476 AD to 1453. Why? Well, 476 is when the last Western Roman emperor was deposed and Rome's power came to an end, as we saw previously. Rome's defeat signaled the end of antiquity and the end of the early Christian era. 1453 is when the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople, was defeated by the Ottoman Islamic Empire. Medieval education. In the early medieval age, a primary way, but not only way, where Catholics were educated beyond catechetical instruction was in monasteries. There were also clerical non-monastic schools. As cities developed, bishops began improving their cathedral schools in order to more effectively educate their clergy. Soon, the demand for education surpassed what the cathedral schools could offer. This led to the founding of a new model of education, the university. In 1155, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa greatly helped this new educational model to develop by issuing the constitution called Authentica Habita. The constitution document allowed students and scholars to travel with less impediment in order to study in foreign lands. If they acquired debt during the time of their studies, the Constitution required that they were to be treated justly. They were further protected by the option of being tried by their teachers or in the courts of the local bishop. A notable example of an early university was the University of Paris, La Sorbonne, established around 1231. Pope Gregory IX gave formal recognition of the university's self-governance in his papal bull Parens Scientiarum. Across Europe, similarly structured universities were also founded. The universities were organized in a similar way as the guild system was, which we will discuss later. The teachers acted as the masters with the students as apprentices. The curriculum of the universities, originally from classical antiquity, broke up education according to two main categories, quality and quantity. That which is highly quantifiable was called the quadrivium, which in Latin means four ways or four roads. The quadrivium consisted of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. In addition to the quantifiable subjects that focused on there were also subjects that focused on quality. These were the trivium and included grammar, rhetoric, and logic. During the middle of the 1200s, these ways to wisdom were supplemented by philosophical studies, namely natural, metaphysical, and moral. Universities distinguished themselves from others by emphasizing some of the ways over others. For example, the University of Oxford focused on natural philosophy more than the University of Paris did. The University of Paris was known for its metaphysics and logic. The systematic way of study at the universities is commonly called scholasticism. While a development of the ancient monastic educational model, the scholastic system of education was quite different in a number of key ways. Monastic education was undertaken primarily for personal spiritual growth. Life and study, therefore, were to be integrated. The scholastic model, in contrast, with its emphasis on abstract theoretical knowledge, studied in a systematic, logical, and highly rational manner, tended to separate study from life. In describing this integration of the learning or the love of letters with sanctification, the noted scholar Jean Leclerc, in The Love of Learning and the Desire for God, beautifully writes this, and I'm going to share this with you. And I quote, "Monastic culture of the Middle Ages has two kinds of sources. Some are of literary nature, written texts whose content must be assimilated through meditative reading or through study. Others belong to the domain of religious experience. Of these latter, the most important, the one which enables all the others to be combined in the harmony of a synthesis, is the one which induces the desire to reach the culmination of this experience. The content of monastic culture has seemed to be synthesized by these two words, grammar and spirituality. On the one hand, learning is necessary if one is to approach God and to express what is perceived of Him. On the other hand, literature must be continually transcended and elevated in the striving to attain eternal life." End of quote. Simply because there was this tendency does not mean, though, that the scholastic model could not as well be integrated with the growth in sanctity. A few examples of great scholastic saints are the Dominican Saint Albert the Great, and Saint Thomas Aquinas, and the Franciscan Saint Bonaventure. Albert the Great taught Aquinas, who studied at the University of Paris along with Bonaventure. Medieval science. Scientific discoveries flourished during the medieval age. A main reason for this is the Judeo-Christian belief in a God who out of nothing created the world. Since God created the world bears within it an intelligent design of its divine author and his uncreated intellect. By being made in God's image and likeness, men and women are also intelligent, and therefore, with their created intellects, can decipher the intelligent design of the world instilled in it by God. As Benedict XVI wrote, and I quote, "Man can rethink the logos, the meaning of being, because his own logos, his own reason is logos of the one logos, thought of the original thought, of the creative spirit that permeates and governs his being." End of quote. Acceptance and faith in a creating God who himself is uncreated leads to the conclusion that what he created is not divine with a mind and or an unpredictable will of its own, but instead unfolds according to the providential designs of God's mind. The intelligent unfolding of the world is another way of saying that there are laws within the world that are capable of being discovered scientifically by the human mind. A few notable examples of people encouraged by their faith to make scientific discoveries include the following. The English bishop Robert Grosseteste examined light in an empirical manner, preparing for the way for his student Roger Bacon's scientific method. The French bishop Nicolas Oresme was an accomplished mathematician who studied motion, including the rotation of the earth. The Dominican German bishop St. Albert the Great was a botanist and zoologist. The German Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa was a skilled mathematician and astronomer. The Franciscan friar Roger Bacon developed an empirically based methodology for studying creation. Prior to Galileo, the Polish canon Nicholas Copernicus provided evidence for the heliocentric theory, but unlike Galileo, Copernicus did so in a respectful and cautious manner that did not unduly upset church officials. Since a woman medieval scientist has not been mentioned, we will conclude with St. Hildegard of Bingen. St. Hildegard of Bingen was a German Benedictine abbess who demonstrated proficiency not only in theology and philosophy, but also in botany and in medicine. In recognition of her significant contributions, Pope Benedict XVI named St. Hildegard a Doctor of the Church on the 7th October of 2012. Medieval guilds. The medieval age was not only one of individual scientific achievement and enlightenment, propelled by the enlightenment given by faith, but it also was an age in which people gathered together to care for one another communally. This forming of protective and caring associations is in accordance with the early Christian life recorded in Acts chapter 2, verse 45. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. According to Tertullian, the Romans noticed this unique Christian love and would at times say in astonishment, "See how they love one another." The early Christian father St. Justin Martyr similarly wrote, "We who formerly delighted in fornication, but now embrace chastity alone, we who formerly used magical arts, dedicate ourselves to the good and unbegotten God. We who valued above all things the acquisition of wealth and possessions, now bring what we have into a common stock, and communicate to everyone in need." End of quote. Workers of the medieval age expressed the pronounced Christian communal tendency by forming themselves into guilds that not only controlled quality, but also provided a protective Christian environment. And in your transcript, I provide key excerpts from the Southampton English Guild, where it lays out the communal security that the guild protects. Medieval literature and medieval visual art. Major Christian-inspired medieval work include the Canterbury Tales, the Poem of the Cid, the Song of Roland, and the Divine Comedy. The Canterbury Tales were written by the Englishman Geoffrey Chaucer. It describes stories pilgrims share as they travel to a shrine dedicated to St. Thomas Becket. The late 12th or early 13th century Spanish poem called the Poem the Cid is based on the life of a Catholic Spaniard, El Cid, who fought against Muslim rule. The 11th or early 12th century Song of Roland is a French novel on the 778 Battle of Roncesvalles Pass during the reign of Charlemagne. The 14th century Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri is a poem on Dante being guided through hell, purgatory, and finally into heaven. Much of medieval painting, influenced by Byzantine iconic art, is highly stylized and formal. Near the end of the medieval age, this style began to be modified by a more natural and flowing style. And in your transcript, I provide you with key examples of that. God bless.